The average adult today is, biologically, 3 to 7 years older than their birthday says. Not because of cigarettes, not because of alcohol, not because of what you ate for dinner. You are aging faster than you should be, right now. And the thing doing it is completely invisible to you because our entire culture has agreed to pretend it's normal. For the next 20 minutes, I'm going to take that agreement apart. And by the time this video ends, you're going to look at your own morning routine, the one you did today, without thinking as something much closer to a controlled lifespan experiment than a lifestyle. Here's what I find darkly funny about the modern longevity conversation. There is an industry worth tens of billions of dollars selling you NAD+ precursors, rapamycin stacks, cold plunge tubs, red light panels, methylation tests, DNA analyses, epigenetic clocks, and supplements with names that sound like they got rejected from a cyberpunk novel. The promise is always the same. Science is catching up to aging, and for the low cost of $300 a month, you too can slow your biological clock. Meanwhile, the stuff that's actually shortening your life costs exactly zero to fix. You don't need a biohacking lab. You don't need a functional medicine doctor. You don't need to mail your blood to Tallinn. What you need is to stop doing a handful of things our culture has normalized so completely that questioning them out loud makes you sound like a conspiracy theorist. Think with me for a second. You are, right now, performing a set of daily behaviors that are measurably chewing years off your lifespan. You did one of them in the last hour. You'll probably do another one within 10 minutes of this video ending. And the worst part is that you inherited these behaviors from a culture that inherited them going back a generation or two, because everyone does it, and this is just how adults live. And what else are you supposed to do? You have a job. By the end of this video, you will know which behaviors those are. You will know how much biological time they're costing you, and you will know the peer-reviewed studies that prove it. Not a single supplement will be mentioned. Not a single product. Just things you are already doing and should stop. Let me start with the one that's probably killing the highest percentage of people watching this. Sleep. Specifically, the quiet cultural agreement that 6 hours is enough for a functioning adult. That agreement is not based on science. It is based on the fact that modern capitalism does not want you to sleep 8 hours, because 8 hours of you unconscious is 8 hours of you not producing, not consuming, and not scrolling. So a lie got invented, and the lie got repeated, and at some point, I only need 6 became a personality trait. The lie is this. The body does not compensate for chronic sleep restriction. You do not adapt to 5 hours. What happens, according to Matthew Walker's entire body of work at UC Berkeley, is that your cognitive performance craters by the 3rd day of restriction, but your subjective sense of how tired you are flatlines. You feel fine. Your brain is not fine. The MRI scans of chronically underslept adults show glymphatic clearance reductions so severe that researchers describe it as a low-grade chronic traumatic brain injury. Every night you sleep less than 7 hours. The cerebrospinal fluid that washes beta amyloid out of your brain works at reduced capacity. Those plaques accumulate. This is not hysteria. This is the Alzheimer's pathway playing out in slow motion every single night. And it's not just your brain. Chronic sleep restriction shortens your telomeres, the protective caps on the ends of your chromosomes that determine how many times your cells can divide before they senesce. A 2014 study by Prather and Eppel, published in the journal Sleep, found that adults sleeping under 6 hours a night had telomere lengths equivalent to being anywhere from 4 to 11 years older than their chronological age. Let that sit for a second. The difference between sleeping 6 hours and sleeping 7.5 is not a matter of being a little more tired. It's the difference between your cells behaving as if you are 35 and your cells behaving as if you are 42. For free, every night, for years. Look at the absurdity of this. We live in a culture that will pay $4,000 for a continuous glucose monitor that, in a healthy person, tells you almost nothing actionable, while proudly broadcasting on LinkedIn that we sleep 5 hours because we're grinding. The person sleeping 5 hours is aging themselves at a rate that no supplement in existence can reverse. No amount of cold plunging undoes it. No dose of resveratrol touches it. Sleep is the single biggest intervention available to you. It is free, and you are refusing to take it because a hustle culture, invented by people selling productivity courses, convinced you that needing rest is weakness. And before someone in the comments tells me they function fine on 6 hours, no, you don't. A 2003 study by Van Dongen at the University of Pennsylvania measured reaction time, cognitive flexibility, and attentional performance in adults restricted to 6 hours of sleep for 14 consecutive days. By day 14, those adults were performing at the cognitive level of someone who had been awake for 48 hours straight. And here's the kicker: they reported feeling only slightly tired. The brain is an extraordinary liar when it comes to its own fatigue. You cannot trust your subjective sense of how you're doing. You can only trust the data. And the data says that the habit you're most proud of getting by on less sleep than your body needs is biologically equivalent to aging yourself on purpose. One more thing on this, because it's the one that tends to break people out of denial. Chronic sleep restriction doesn't just age you, it reshapes the way your body metabolizes sugar. After 6 nights of 4-hour sleep, healthy young adults develop glucose tolerance, patterns indistinguishable from pre-diabetics. Their insulin sensitivity collapses. Their cortisol profile flips in 6 nights, and the effect is still detectable a week after they return to normal sleep. This is your body telling you, in the most literal biochemical language possible, that it will not negotiate with you about this. Sleep 8 hours or accelerate. There is no third option. Which brings me to the second thing you're doing right now while you watch this video. That is silently taking years off your life. You're sitting. I know what you're thinking. I go to the gym. I do CrossFit. I run on weekends. None of that matters for what I'm about to tell you, and this is one of the most counterintuitive findings in the entire health science literature. A 2016 Lancet meta-analysis of over 1 million adults found that the health risks of prolonged sitting 8 or more hours a day are not fully offset by even vigorous exercise. The group that went to the gym 5 times a week and then sat 10 hours a day at a desk had a mortality risk significantly higher than the group that did not exercise at all, walked around during the day. Read that again. The hour you spend at the gym does not cancel the 10 hours you spend in a chair. This contradicts everything we've been told about exercise, and it contradicts it because the two things are measuring different biological processes. The gym works your cardiovascular system in bursts. Prolonged sitting is a chronic metabolic state, and that chronic state, according to James Levine at the Mayo Clinic, triggers something he calls metabolic shutdown. Within 90 minutes of continuous sitting, the enzyme lipoprotein lipase, which is responsible for clearing fat from your bloodstream, drops to 10% of its normal activity. Your triglycerides climb, your HDL cholesterol falls, your glucose uptake by muscle cells collapses. All of this starts in the first 2 hours of sitting. All of it resumes the moment you stand up. The evolutionary math here is grim when you think about it. The human body was not designed to go from bed to car to chair to couch to bed. It was designed to move, not sprint, not lift heavy, just move constantly in low-grade motion all day. Hunter-gatherer populations, studied by Herman Pontzer at Duke, spend roughly 2 hours per day in what we would call exercise. But the other 12 waking hours are spent in fluid, low-intensity movement, walking to water, walking to firewood, walking to relatives. Their sitting time averages 3 to 4 hours. Ours averages 11. And this matters because sitting is not just an absence of movement. It is an active biological signal. Prolonged sitting triggers measurable increases in systemic inflammation, reduces mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning your cells make fewer new energy factories, and correlates with accelerated telomere shortening independent of all other variables. A 2014 study from Lund University followed previously sedentary adults who implemented a standing and walking protocol for 6 months. Their telomeres, on average, lengthened. Let me say that one more time because it sounds insane. Walking more instead of sitting more caused their cells to become biologically younger by a measurable genetic marker. This is the only known behavior change in a normally aging adult that produces telomere lengthening in a peer-reviewed trial without pharmacological intervention. And yet, and this is the part that actually annoys me, the entire industry response to this finding has been to sell you a standing desk, a $1,900 electric sit-stand desk, for a problem whose solution is stand up every 30 minutes. That's it. You don't need the desk. You need a phone alarm. Every 30 minutes, stand up, walk across the room, come back. The intervention is that pathetic. It costs nothing. And you are not doing it because nobody told you it was a big deal. Pay attention to this because it's the cruelest part. The longer you sit, the less you want to move. Mitochondrial dysfunction induced by prolonged sitting produces fatigue. Fatigue reduces your inclination to stand. Reduced standing induces further mitochondrial dysfunction. It's a feedback loop. And it's the reason office workers in their 30s feel tired all the time for reasons their blood tests can't explain. You are not depressed. You are not low on iron. You are sitting yourself into an accelerated aging state. And your body is trying to tell you, with every yawn and every 3 p.m. crash, that something is wrong. The third one is going to sound absurd when I say it out loud, and I'm aware of this. Ready? You are, statistically, breathing wrong. And the way you're breathing is aging you. I know how this sounds. Look, I've been breathing for 34 years. I think I've got it figured out. And the answer to that is no, you don't. And neither do I. And neither does roughly 80% of the adult population of developed countries. This is one of the most under-discussed phenomena in modern physiology. Journalist James Nestor spent 10 years researching this for his book Breath, and what he found across dozens of labs and clinics and anthropology studies is that mouth breathing, which is what most modern adults do, especially while sleeping, produces measurable long-term damage to the face, the airway, the cardiovascular system, and the brain. Stanford researchers taped Nestor's nose shut for 10 days to force mouth breathing, and his blood pressure rose, his heart rate variability crashed, his sleep quality collapsed, and his snoring went up by over 4,000%. Then they taped his mouth shut for 10 nights to force nasal breathing. Everything reversed within weeks. The mechanism here is elegant, and once you understand it, you cannot stop noticing it. Your nose is not a decorative feature. It is a pharmacological machine. Nasal passages produce nitric oxide, a vasodilator and antimicrobial molecule that gets delivered directly to your lungs with every inhale. Nitric oxide widens your arteries, improves oxygen delivery to your tissues, and reduces systemic inflammation. When you breathe through your mouth, none of this happens. You bypass the factory entirely. You pull in air that is unfiltered, unhumidified, and nitric oxide free. Your oxygen uptake drops by up to 18%. Your body compensates by increasing heart rate and vascular resistance. Every breath, for years, at this slightly elevated stress level. And the chronic effect of this is, genuinely, aging. Mouth breathing during sleep correlates with increased arterial stiffness, elevated morning cortisol, reduced deep sleep architecture, and significantly higher rates of cardiovascular disease across decades of follow-up. A 2021 review in Sleep Medicine Reviews estimated that chronic mouth breathing during sleep knocks roughly 5 to 7 years off cardiovascular health span. 5 to 7 years from the way air enters your body. This also explains the thing nobody wants to talk about, the face. Children who breathe through their mouths develop recognizably different craniofacial structures than children who breathe through their noses. Narrower jaws, recessed chins, more crowded teeth. This is why orthodontic treatment has exploded in modern populations while it was almost non-existent in pre-industrial societies. We didn't used to need braces because we didn't used to breathe wrong. In adults, chronic mouth breathing continues to reshape the face subtly, flattening cheekbones and pulling the lower jaw into a more retracted position. I'm not going to tell you this is why you don't look like your childhood photos. But I'm also not going to tell you it's not a factor. Here's the fix, and the fix is obnoxiously simple. Tape your mouth shut when you sleep. I'm not joking. This is the most widely recommended intervention among sleep researchers who specialize in breathing disorders, and the results in every small clinical trial run on it are absurd. Snoring drops, sleep quality rises, blood pressure normalizes, daytime energy returns, and the cost of the intervention is roughly 50 cents a night in surgical tape. Look at the absurdity of this. You will spend $200 on a melatonin subscription and $400 on a sleep tracker ring, and the intervention that actually works, learning to breathe through the hole in your face that was designed for it, you won't try because it sounds weird. I'm telling you now that it sounds weird because the industry selling you sleep products makes zero money if you fix your breathing. So you never hear about it. And so you continue to spend the next 40 years mouth breathing your way through every night and wondering why you feel 10% worse than you think you should. This next one is going to make you uncomfortable. Good. That's the point. Loneliness is killing you faster than almost anything else on this list. I mean this in the most literal, measurable, peer-reviewed sense. Julianne Holt Lundstad, A professor at Brigham Young University published a series of meta-analyses starting in 2010, looking at mortality data across 148 prospective studies involving over 300,000 participants. What she found is that the mortality risk of chronic social isolation, meaning lacking close relationships, consistent face-to-face contact, and a felt sense of belonging is equivalent to smoking approximately 15 cigarettes a day. It is a larger mortality risk factor than obesity. It is a larger mortality risk factor than physical inactivity. It is, in the aggregate, one of the top 3 predictors of early death in the entire medical literature. And yet, if I asked the person watching this right now when they last spent 3 hours in face-to-face conversation with a close friend, not on a screen, not in a text thread, not at a party with 20 other people, they would struggle to remember. And if I told them that this absence is doing more damage to their body than a pack-a-day habit, they would roll their eyes, because loneliness doesn't feel like a public health crisis. It feels like a personal inconvenience. Here's what the physiology actually shows. Chronic loneliness, measured not by how often you're alone, but by your subjective sense of disconnection, produces a sustained elevation in cortisol, a chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system, an increase in inflammatory cytokines like interleukin 6 and C-reactive protein, and a measurable reduction in immune cell diversity. Chronically lonely adults have roughly 25% higher rates of cardiovascular disease, 30% higher rates of stroke, and accelerated telomere attrition relative to age-matched peers with strong social ties. This is not loneliness feels bad. This is loneliness writes itself into your DNA and tells your cells to divide less, inflame more, and die sooner. And the modern world is extremely well designed to keep you in this state. I'm not going to go full social media is the devil, because that's lazy. But I will tell you that if your primary mode of maintaining friendships is Instagram messages and the occasional group chat, you are getting the nutritional equivalent of eating pictures of food. Your nervous system does not register a WhatsApp reply the way it registers a face, a voice, a shared physical space, a laugh from across a table. The co-regulation that happens between 2 human nervous systems in the same room is not replicable in text, and your body knows. Your body has been keeping score. The cruelest part of modern loneliness is that it is almost invisible to the person experiencing it. You don't feel lonely because you're too busy. You have co-workers. You have notifications. You have a social life of sorts. The gap between what your nervous system requires, which is deep, consistent, embodied relational contact, and what it actually receives from modern friendship patterns is so large, and the language we have for describing it is so impoverished that most people never identify it until they hit 40 and realize they've been low-grade starving for 2 decades. Here is the opinion part. I think modern loneliness is the single most under-discussed health crisis of our generation. Bigger than processed food, bigger than sedentarism, bigger, even in some cohorts, than sleep deprivation, because loneliness potentiates all of the others. Lonely people sleep worse. Lonely people eat more poorly. Lonely people exercise less. Loneliness is the upstream multiplier on almost every other aging accelerator in this video. And it is being papered over, culturally, with dopamine hit substitutes designed to simulate connection without delivering it. The intervention here is not a supplement. It is not a therapist, though therapy can help. It is a willingness to rebuild in your actual physical life The kind of relationships that require inconvenience, showing up, driving across town, saying something vulnerable out loud to someone who can see your face, which nobody does anymore, because it's hard, and because we've collectively pretended that the thumbs-up reaction on a voice note counts as friendship. It doesn't. Your cells are aware of this, even if you aren't. 3 more, and I'll move faster, because by now the pattern should be obvious. Every single one of these works through the same final common pathway, chronic activation of a stress system that was designed to run for minutes, not decades. Number 1. The low-grade urgency you live in all day. You wake up, grab your phone, scroll notifications, see a work email, feel your shoulders tighten, then spend the next 16 hours in a state your ancestors would only have entered if a predator was within visual range. Chronic cortisol elevation, and I mean the kind produced by low-grade modern stress, not acute trauma, damages mitochondrial DNA through a mechanism called oxidative phosphorylation leakage. Your cells' power plants, over years, start to malfunction. Energy production drops, cellular waste accumulates. You feel tired. You think you need coffee. Coffee raises your cortisol further. You feel more tired. The feedback loop is exquisite. Robert Sapolsky at Stanford has written an entire body of work on this, and his summary is brutally simple. The human stress response was engineered for acute, short-duration threats. Modern life delivers it chronically and without resolution. The biological consequence is that every tissue in your body is soaked in low-grade cortisol all day, every day, for decades. Your hippocampus shrinks, your immune function dysregulates, your telomeres shorten. You develop something researchers now call inflammaging, the accumulation of chronic, low-grade inflammation that defines biological aging more accurately than almost any other marker. And you entered this state not because something terrible happened, but because you check Slack 74 times a day. Number 2. The light. Specifically, the fact that for roughly 4 hours every evening, you are staring at a screen bright enough to suppress your melatonin production by up to 85%. Your pineal gland does not know it's 10 p.m. Your pineal gland thinks it's noon, because that is what the spectrum of light hitting your retina is telling it. Melatonin is not just a sleep hormone. It is one of the most powerful antioxidants your body produces. It scavenges free radicals. It regulates mitochondrial function. It modulates immune cell behavior. And you are suppressing it every night for hours because your brain is watching a YouTube video, like this one. I am aware of the irony. Turn your brightness down and use night mode, because every night of suppressed melatonin is a night of suppressed cellular repair. Number 3. The way you eat sugar, and I don't just mean eat less sugar. I mean the entire pattern of shoveling carbohydrates into your system in 8-minute eating windows while standing up or driving. This produces blood glucose spikes that, over years, drive a process called advanced glycation end product formation. AGEs are what happen when sugar molecules bond to proteins and form stiff, non-functional cross-linked structures. This is what's happening to the collagen in your skin when it starts looking older. It is what's happening to the proteins in your arteries when they start losing elasticity. It is what's happening to the crystalline proteins in your eye lens, which is why cataracts develop in the first place. AGEs are not reversible. You don't break them down. They accumulate. And every time you slam a sugary coffee drink in 5 minutes on the way to a meeting, you are laying down more of them in tissues that will never get rid of them. The unifying pattern here, and this is the thing I want you to walk away from this video understanding, is that modern life has hijacked every major physiological system by delivering low-grade, chronic versions of signals that were designed to be rare and acute. Chronic cortisol instead of acute stress, chronic blue light instead of seasonal dawn and dusk, chronic sugar instead of occasional fruit, chronic sitting instead of intermittent rest, chronic mouth breathing instead of mouth breathing only during effort, chronic social isolation instead of brief solitude. Your body has no defense mechanism for chronicity. The evolutionary playbook assumes none of these signals stay on for decades. But we have engineered a culture where every single one of them does. Here's the thing I think everybody misses, and I want you to sit with it for a second before this video ends. The longevity industry, the one selling you the $300 supplements, the $800 continuous glucose monitors, the $2,000 biological age tests, has an economic interest in you believing that aging is a problem solved through consumption. That there is a pill, a device, a test, a protocol that you must buy regularly to intervene on the process. And that interest is not aligned with the truth. The truth, supported by every meta-analysis I've cited in this video, is that the overwhelming majority of preventable biological aging in a non-smoking, non-drinking, normally fed adult comes from 6 behaviors. Sleeping under 7 hours, sitting over 8 hours, breathing through the mouth, living in chronic low-grade stress, exposing the eyes to bright light after sundown, and existing in relational isolation. That's it. Those 6. Each one acts through a different molecular pathway, but all 6 converge on the same downstream effects: accelerated telomere attrition, chronic inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, cortisol dysregulation, and glycation damage. And none of them is fixable with a supplement. Every single one is fixable with a behavior change that costs 0. Let that recontextualize everything you've been sold for the last decade. Every wellness influencer with a branded mushroom coffee, every biohacker with a cold plunge and a red light panel, every podcast guest selling you a protocol. The uncomfortable question none of them wants to answer is this: if your sleep, your movement, your breathing, your stress, your light exposure, and your relationships are all broken, which for most modern adults, they are, then no supplement on earth is going to meaningfully move the needle. You are trying to fill a leaking bucket through a straw. The supplement industry depends on you not noticing the hole. And here's the darker part. There is an asymmetry in which behaviors get attention, and it follows the money. Sleep is hard to monetize. So you get airtime about sleep trackers rather than airtime about the fact that you need to go to bed at 10 p.m. Sitting is hard to monetize, so you get standing desks sold to you rather than a simple reminder to walk every 30 minutes. Breathing is hard to monetize, so it barely gets discussed at all. Loneliness is hard to monetize, so we pretend it's a personality problem rather than a public health emergency. And stress, the biggest of all, gets addressed with meditation apps and adaptogens rather than with the only intervention that actually works, which is taking your hand off the phone and going for a walk. You can spend the next 40 years believing that your biological age is something you manage through what you put in your mouth. Or you can accept that it is something you manage through what you do for the 16 hours of the day when you're not eating. The latter is inconvenient. The former is lucrative. One of these realities wants to sell you something. The other wants you to stop doing 6 things. I'll let you guess which one is true. And I want you to hear this clearly, the part of this video that I think matters most. The thing nobody will tell you. Every single one of the behaviors I've described in this video is reversible. Not to the extent that you'll reclaim every year you've lost, but to a degree that is clinically meaningful, measurable, and often detectable within 3 to 6 months of consistent behavior change. Your telomeres respond, your inflammation drops, your mitochondria rebuild, your cortisol normalizes, your glycation slows. You cannot stop aging, but you can stop accelerating it. And you can start today in the next 30 seconds by standing up. I'd like to know, genuinely, which one of the 6 landed hardest for you. Because I know, while I was researching this video, there was one specific finding that made me close my laptop and stare at the ceiling for about 20 minutes. Tell me in the comments which of the 6 is the one you've been doing every day without noticing. I read every comment on these videos, and the pattern of what people recognize in themselves tells me what to research next. If this video made you reconsider even one of your routines, there is a second part coming, where I unpack the 2 behaviors I didn't have time for in this one. The one around eating speed and the one around temperature exposure, both of which are arguably as damaging as anything I covered here. Subscribe if you want that when it drops. I want to close with the thing I opened with because it's more true now than it was 20 minutes ago. Right now, as you finish this video, your cells are aging at a rate that is partially under your control. Not entirely. Genetics, environment, luck, all of that matters. But a significant fraction of your biological trajectory over the next 30 years is decided not by what is done to you, but by what you continue to do to yourself. Every night you sleep 6 hours instead of 8. Every 11-hour sitting day without interruption. Every evening spent with a bright screen 2 feet from your face. Every month that passes without a 3-hour conversation in the same room as someone you love. Every morning that begins with a phone and a cortisol spike instead of 15 minutes of silence. These are not dramatic. They are not catastrophic. They do not feel like anything at all in the moment, which is exactly why they work. The biological damage of chronic, low-grade, normalized behaviors is invisible by design. It accumulates below the threshold of subjective experience until, one day, around age 50 or 55, it suddenly isn't invisible anymore. The diagnosis arrives. The blood test comes back. The mirror shows something you don't recognize. And the natural human reaction is to think that this is how aging is supposed to feel, and that nothing could have been done differently. That is the lie I want to leave you.